You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. At a local restaurant where I eat fairly regularly, the daytime maitre d' saves me the trade journals that come to the restaurant. A trade journal is a business industry magazine. Like this one, for example, advertises commercial products. He knows I like those magazines because they have restaurant recipes in them. They have to be modified, obviously, because I don't have access to the kind of commercial ingredients that restaurants get regularly. But they're unique in some ways. Now, the one that I want to make today, which is little fruit pies, I thought was really unique. Never heard of it before. And I went to a gathering this past weekend here in the trailer park, and I was sitting with one of my neighbors. She was asking me what I was going to be doing for my TV show, and I started to describe these little pies, and she said, "Oh, hand pies." Yeah, that's what they're called, hand pies. I had never heard of them before, but she knew everything about them, so maybe they're not quite as unique as I thought. So that's what I want to make. I want to make some hand pies today. They use apples and Bosc pears. The thing that I want to change about them is the restaurant uses blue cheese and cheddar cheese inside. And that just doesn't sit right with me. So I thought, how about feta? What about feta cheese? I think that would make these pies taste really delicious. But the first thing I need to do is make my pastry for my pastry shells. I'm going to start by putting into a large bowl 2 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour. I always weigh my flour when I'm baking, so this is 14 ounces by weight, or 400 grams. And I'm going to set that aside and move to a smaller bowl in which I'm going to put, I use a rubber mat here because that drives me nuts, all that noise. I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of water and 1/2 teaspoon-ish of salt. I'm just going to put a good pinch of salt in there. 2 large eggs that I've already broken out of their shells. And then 1 cup of butter. This is 227 grams. This should be at room temperature, which will become pretty obvious, or the reason why will become pretty obvious in a moment. So there's my 2 cups of butter. Get all of that in there. Wipe my finger. And then 1 tablespoon of sugar. I use sugar in a sweet pie crust. When I'm making this for a savory pie, I don't put sugar in it. Now here's why you want the butter at room temperature, because you need to break all this butter up, and that would be very difficult to do if it was frozen, or not frozen, but cold and hard from the refrigerator. And this is going to take a while because I want to break this up into beads. And if I have to, I can use my spatula to push that butter out. Once this gets all wet, that'll be fine. So this is going to take a minute or two to get this all broken up, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's ready. I've been making pastry shells, pie shells this way for like 30 years. I think the original recipe came from a Galloping Gourmet Graham Care cookbook, and it was a pastry shell for making fruit tarts. I can't remember, but I've been doing this for so long, it always works. Once you find something that works, why change? All right, so that didn't take long. That's all nicely broken up into beads. Let me see if I can do a close-up of that to show you what that looks like. So there's a close-up of that. Hopefully you can see that that's little beads. I mean, it's not tiny, tiny beads like buckshot or BBs, but small enough that that will distribute that butter throughout the flour when I next combine this with the flour. All right, now that my butter is all broken up, I want to pour that into my flour. And then I'm going to combine this in the bowl as best I can until this is dry enough to knead. I'm going to knead this very little. It's just not going to need a lot of kneading because it comes together so quickly. As I say, I've been doing this for decades and this always works for me. Okay, I've gone about as far as I can go with the spatula here. So now what I'm going to do is starting in the bowl, I'm just going to start pulling this together with my hands, lifting up any crumbs that are on the bottom of that bowl. And I can do pretty much all my kneading right here in the bowl because this doesn't require a lot of kneading. It comes together so quickly that that's it. I mean, that quickly my pie crust comes together. That's a beautiful butter dough. Every time I make this, it comes out that way. It's just beautiful. That'll be easy to work with because it's soft, it's pliable. So now I'm going to wrap this in plastic and set it aside. By the way, if you're working in a very hot kitchen like it's summertime, this could get oily if the butter starts to melt. If it does start to feel oily, wrap it in plastic and put it in the refrigerator for a while, maybe 10 or 20 minutes to cool that butter down somewhat. And then it'll come back into a workable state. The next thing I need to do is peel and dice my fruit. Because I'm working with little pies and not a big 9-inch, 23-centimeter pie, I want little pieces of fruit. So I'm going to dice my fruit fairly fine. I have here 2 large Granny Smith apples. These are 10 ounces each or 283 grams. I'm going to work with my potato fruit peeler here. This does a really good job. When I bought this, I just kind of bought it on speculation, and to be honest, I didn't think this was going to work very well, but it actually does an excellent job. So I'm going to cut my apple in half here, and then just work out these sections. Take out the core. And then this bottom section. And then what I have set aside is a bowl with a little bit of water and some lemon juice in there so that I can stir these apples pieces in that lemon juice and water and keep them from turning brown because the fruit will oxidize quickly. And you can see I'm cutting these a lot smaller than I would if I was making a big apple pie. So I have this half to do and my other piece of apple, and then I will get to my pears. I have 2 Bosc pears here. These weigh more than 7 ounces each, or about 200 grams. And the same thing, I want to peel and dice these as well. And for this, I'm going to start off by taking this top section off, because this I can pretty much just dice up. There's going to be a little bit of stem right inside of here. That's the stem section. All right, that goes into my bowl, and then I'm going to cut this in half, and the same as I did my apple, just cut out that core. And yes, if you hear that plane going overhead, I do live near the airport. Get my bottom section off there. Same thing, I want fairly small pieces. And same on this side. All right, so there's one of my pears. I have my other one to do, and then my fruit will be all done. Now that I have all my fruit diced up, I'm ready to start combining most of the other ingredients that are going to go into my pie filling. To my fruit, I'm going to be adding 6 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1/2 cup, this is about 2 ounces, 60 grams of chopped pecans, and then 4 tablespoons of cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of butter. I melted the butter here so that I can get it to distribute more evenly. This is some lemon zest. You can put in as much lemon zest as you want. That's the zest from 1 lemon. And then this is a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'm going to be putting in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I know that's 4 of these eyedroppers. 3 and 4. And although the original recipe didn't call for it, I want to put some fresh grated nutmeg in there. About 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. I just think that'll add a little bit nicer flavor. Now I want to put a rubber glove on because I want to mix all this up with my hand. It's just so much more efficient to do this with a hand rather than a spoon. Don't crush the fruit when you do this, just kind of get it all mixed around, get everything evenly distributed. Most of the nuts are probably going to go to the bottom, but when I spoon this into the pies, I'll make sure to pick up some of those nuts from the bottom of the bowl. You can see they're going to the bottom, but that's fine. I have one more thing to do before I forget. I need to crumble my feta. You can buy feta crumbled up. This comes packaged as a chunk, so I'm just going to crumble this myself. So there's my feta cheese, and I'm just going to get in there with a fork and just break that up. That crumbles up so easily. I don't think I mentioned how much feta cheese I'm using here. I bought 1 8-ounce package, which is equivalent to 227 grams. I'm crumbling this in a separate bowl because I'm going to put it into the pies separately. I'm not going to mix this in with my fruit, and you'll see that when I get to that stage. So there it is. That's good enough. That's my crumbled feta. Little taste of that. Yes, that's excellent. I think that's better than blue cheese as far as going into my pies. I'm going to be making my hand pies using a muffin pan. I'm hoping to get 12 out of this. I'm going to divide everything into the 12 cups. I am in the meantime heating my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 190 degrees Celsius. I'm going to divide my dough here into 2 parts. A smaller part, about 1/3. This is going to be for my top crusts, so I'm going to wrap that to keep that moist and put that away. And this is going to be for my bottom crusts. So I'm going to divide this, first of all, into 4 equal parts. And then each of these I'm going to divide into 3 parts and shape them for the bottom crust. These I'll keep wrapped and put these aside. I marked a piece of parchment with a couple of circles of the sizes I think I'm going to need for a bottom crust and a top crust. I just used pencil for that. So now I'm going to take a bit of my dough. This is one of my chunks, and I'm going to shape that. I'm going to dust it with a little bit of flour. Whoa. And you can either shape this with your fingers, or I even have one of these little Italian pastry rollers that I bought a number of years ago. It squeaks, but it works well. All right, goes quickly enough. I have in the meantime now sprayed my muffin pan with non-stick spray. So I'm going to ease this dough into the cups here and just kind of distribute the dough around the edges evenly. Make sure there's no air pockets in there. Then with a little plastic cutter I can trim that top edge, because obviously I have very little space here. I have a little plastic bench scraper here actually. Well, it's a glue spreader that I bought in a craft store. It's just handy for so many things. Alright, so I have to keep doing this until I have all 12 of these cups lined. Then I can start putting my filling in. So there are my 12 muffin tins now, lined with dough. And now, this is why I did the cheese in a separate bowl, because I want to put a little bit of this cheese in the bottom of each hand pie, rather than mixing it in with the fruit. If you have larger tins, you can, of course, use more cheese. Okay, I'm happy with that. Next, I have to start working in my fruit. To add the fruit, feel free to mound the fruit above the top of each pie. I'm just going to keep working around until I'm satisfied that all of these pies are filled to the level that I want. I have quite a bit of fruit left over, which is interesting because the original recipe made 8 to 10. All right. Now, let me get these arranged. If I can add another piece of fruit here and there, I will. I want to make sure that the fruit doesn't overlap any of these edges because I'm going to need to seal the top crust on there. For the top crusts, I'm going to pretty much do the same thing I did for the bottom crust. I divided that piece of dough, that 1/3 shape size piece of dough, into quarters, and then each piece of those into thirds to get 12. And yes, that's a plane going overhead. I do live near the airport. I get tired of the squeaking of this thing. I have mineral oil in the cupboard that I keep from my cutting boards. You want to use mineral oil, not vegetable oil or olive oil, because those can go rancid. Mineral oil cannot. All right. And then I prepared some egg wash. And I've got a pastry brush here. So what I'm going to do is just, rather than trying to brush around all of that, which I'm working with real close quarters, I'm going to brush around this. I can always wipe that parchment paper and even change it if I have to. And now I'm going to lay that on top. It's okay if it bunches up. And I'm going to press that into place. And then with a small knife, I'm going to put a couple of steam vents in there. And the same thing with my plastic bench scraper. Just going to cut off these edges here to trim those a little bit. Like so. And then finally, you can get in with the scraper and just push the edges in a little bit and shape it to give it a rounder look. Like so. And then if you wanted to, you could go around the edge of this with a fork and stitch that. I'm working with such close quarters here. I don't have a lot of room to do this. But it looks like I'll have enough. Let's do one more of those. So I'm going to do this corner one here. Flour my parchment paper. Take out a little piece of dough and shape that with my fingers first. And then finally my roller. I'm going a little bit larger than the circle that I drew on this paper because I know it's going to need to be a little bit bigger because it's going to be kind of mounded up. But I don't want it to be too much bigger. Okay. And then with my pastry brush, just lightly brush the edge of this. And you can brush toward the inside because who cares? I mean, that's not going to make any difference. And line that up, set it over the top, and then pinch it into place. Make sure that it seals around the edge. Trim off any unwanted excess. Like so. And then you can use that plastic edge to shape it a little bit. Get it rounded. Cut a few steam vents. And then finally with a fork, stitch that edge. Like so. Okay, so I have 10 more of these to do, and then these will be ready to go into the oven. I'm ready to do my final garnish now before I put these in the oven. So I'm first going to brush each of these with egg wash. Okay, so I'm just finishing up the egg wash here now. And then using a little sieve, I'm going to dust these lightly with cinnamon. And then what I have here is some raw sugar that I'm going to sprinkle over the top. The reason why I'm using raw sugar is because it's a little bit larger crystal than just regular granulated sugar. So it'll give me a more sparkly, if you will, garnish. My oven is up to temperature, so now I'm going to bake these in the oven for 35 to 40 minutes or until they're nicely golden brown on top. And then I'm going to use a skewer and I'm going to poke inside. If there's little to no resistance, that means the fruit is cooked inside. I want you to see what these look like fresh from the oven. Beautiful. I did get some boiling over. I'm hoping they're not going to stick too badly in those places. They twist nicely. That one's got some sticking. So these should be fairly easy to take out. I'm going to let these thoroughly cool, or at least cool for a good half an hour before I cut into one of these and taste these. A thought occurred to me while I was waiting for these to cool. Maybe the reason why they're called hand pies is you're supposed to eat them with your hands rather than a fork. Let's give it a try. That is definitely very good. I can taste that feta, but it's not very strong. It's not overly sweet, the inside of the pie. I don't like pies that are too sweet. There isn't syrup dribbling out. It's like the perfect consistency, and it tastes delicious. So excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy eating my hand pie. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.